So, yes, hello, welcome back, Vanessa Camilleri from AI Department of University of Malta. We just um, agreed on how difficult it is to do research within AI, for example, as an area, as an information technology area, which is much more pluralistic in terms of criteria of how we verify this kind of area of inquiry where it's not a clear cut. There's so many blurred lines in terms of what things are and what things mean
Yeah.
and how values are applied. Yeah.
So you see these blurred lines happen when we try to intersect technology and how it applies to humans and humanity, and in terms of its maybe user-centric design or the ethics guiding the technology. So when we're testing the technology per se, that's quite straightforward. Okay, we might agree that the technology is accurate, it's precise, it's robust, it's working as it was designed to work. Technically speaking,
Technically speaking.
technically speaking, it's only when we start including, and for many years, that was how it was. For many years, we were, understanding how the technology was working and working on improving this technology. And now the technology has improved, it will continue improving, but now suddenly we realize that there's a huge impact on humans and humanity. So now we're trying to understand it from a more philosophical and ethical perspective. And that's where the complexity comes in. That is where the universal truth starts sort of like shifting slightly. Because then, although people start agreeing that, people's rights need to be defended and protected, and people have got a right to privacy, and people should be, equal. When an AI takes a decision, it should affect people equally. So there's fairness, there's justice within AI and within the applications of AI. The problem is that we might agree, that there is a need for this, but then everybody starts pulling different ropes on how this should be achieved and how to best achieve this. Because if we overlay the lens of philosophical lenses and the lens based on values and philosophical principles and ethics and morality on this AI, then we can view all this from very different angles and perspectives and from different lenses. And so we might get different ways of how we think we're going to achieve it with different consequences. I'm not saying that this, is true, but this is why there are so many problems and ethical questions that are coming up in so many AI-driven applications that we, as yet, have no solution to. We can try our best to minimize harm at this point. We can't eliminate harm completely. What we do is we try to mitigate harm as much as possible. And we use technology to do this, but there's still a lot of questions that we need to consider. And again, this is why technology is not, it's improving, it's the rate of development is accelerating, but the rate at which this is hitting the ground, this is like rolling into society, it's slightly slower, because at the moment that's what we're concerned about, like how is it going to affect the masses. Within labs, certain technological advancements are incredible. The problem is what happens when humans use them, and how do you ensure that it's safe, it's less harmful. Okay. Because we can't really say we remove all harm, as I said. So these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves, and I don't have the answer because they're very, very complex questions, and they're also very much dependent on the nature of the technology and the nature of the use of the technology, which sometimes is very unpredictable, because when we talk about humans, unpredictability is one of the issues that we have to contend with. There are so many variables into this equation now that it becomes difficult to try and understand how people are going to react to it, how people are going to take it up, how people are going to use it, how people are going to be impacted by it. And so it goes on, so the list goes on.
Right. And then what sorts of new behaviors and value
Oh,
systems and so on will it generate as a result? Because I think,
absolutely.
like you rightly said, we still operate with this mindset of the old Cartesian kind of mechanical linear way of thinking. You know, you have this, you apply this, it's A, it leads to B, leads to C, and it's like, but we're increasingly seeing that there's so many unintended consequences of
Oh,
any
a lot.
past implementations of technology. Then now we're kind of, even like social media, like that in that article, like it shows we don't know what results will be of any one of these technologies we've kind of implemented in the past 5 years, let alone
Yeah,
AI, which is like an artificial faculty that is originally human, or it's a natural faculty that is now artificialized. And at the same time, I like this distinction. You said like it's technically correct, it's technically improving, but it's we almost our thinking got because again, going through what I know most, which is Heidegger's critique of technoscientific rationality, we have grown to think of the world as a machine for the past 500 years. And then we've developed these fantastic tools. But then before we realize, at some point, we realize, oh, those tools are not just our tools to use. We kind of are being used by them. We are
yeah,
driven by that progress is driving us.
yeah,
So we end up rushing like on a hamster wheel, right? And thinking,
yeah.
this is not right. This doesn't feel healthy. Like the kids aren't
Mhm.
happy. Like the people don't feel like their lives are meaningful. They have nice cars,
Yeah,
but they can't really feel like this is the way to live.
yeah.
And then we track back and try to think, okay, so now we need to assess risk. But then how can you rationalize something that is inherently um, not merely technical, but it's almost like there's a metaphysical substrate to the phenomenon. Like we can't really reduce it to rationalizing it.
The what you wrote in your article, um, your article is the blind god of digital eugenics, right?
Yeah,
And you were talking about cognitive distortions and on what's happening, even in social media. First of all, there's AI at the back. AI is also working, to make these social media applications so widely addictive and so widely taken up. So you've got this um, behavioral, let's say, attraction of the masses to these applications. So we've got masses of people that are now equating social media to almost like the gateway to interacting with humans. They almost see the social media as a need to interact with more and more humans on a much larger scale. So no, they can't do without it because they want to feel the closeness, they want to feel the sense of community, the sense of connection. So on the one hand, we've got humans that are longing, that have a need for increased connectedness, and social media is providing that. But although the initial need might be the initial sort of like fulfilling role might be seen as good, beneficial. In reality, what's happening is that the social media applications are exploiting this need now, are exploiting this need for monetary benefit, for capitalism. So we've got a need of the people. Social media is seen. We're taking the example of social media as well, but we can take other applications of technology.
mhm.
So technology is fulfilling this need. So the people are happy. The masses of people are happy, and they want more because more means more happiness, a more sense of fulfillment, a more sense of belonging, a more sense of personal achievement, a greater sense of self-achievement. Okay, as a human, I'm connected to so many other humans that might be seen as successful because we've been brought up in an era where the more visibility you have, the more of a success you sort of like are proving yourself to be. People do not want to be hermits, isolated and alone. They want to have connections. The people who are isolated and alone may be considered to be people that have problems, maybe mental difficulties, challenges, with how to overcome their own isolation. So people want to feel connected, and the more connections they have, the better they're going to feel. Now, what happens is this, AI, which is a tool that can be used for good, is being exploited to harvest all this attention and then repurpose it for the people driving these massive applications for them to benefit monetarily, financially from it. And this is what you mentioned, Shoshana Zuboff. Her book is really excellent, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And this is exactly it. This is why, starting from the premise that people, have departed from this need of being seen, of being heard, of being connected, these big tech giants have been working on surveilling their needs to provide more of what they need, what they want. And it's a cycle. And it's all because of money. It's all because of, shall we say, greed at one point. So, and this is where the danger is. This is where the risk is. So I refer back to my previous conversation. We might agree that, we need to design systems that are fair, that are just, that minimize risk. But in reality, what happens is that people themselves, because they're already hooked, their behavior has already been molded. No, so the people are buying into this already. They don't need to do anything. People just want more and more of it. And what we can do is maybe at this point raise awareness. Listen, this is sort of like, what can happen. This is why this is happening. This is why you've got so many followers, or this is why, there are so many ads that are targeted to you. This is why it's like, the social media is listening to you. This is why this is all happening. As long as you're aware of it and you're aware of the consequences, but really aware, not just because your behavior has been molded, has been changed, has been directed towards a certain custom. Okay?
Engineered, effectively.
Engineered,
right?
Exactly. It's being engineered, and it's not just the behavior of one individual, it's the behavior of many individuals.
Of whole clusters of population.
Whole clusters of populations. And, if you see this social graph of how people are connected, just, manipulating or engineering one cluster may be enough to, you spoke about the experiment, the contagion experiment. It can just traverse the internet at such a fast rate, and it can spread as faster than any pandemic that we have experienced. So so this is the danger. This is the danger, and we're right in it. And we can speak as much as you want about the risks, and we can speak as much as we want about, how AI can be harmful. The matter of fact is that the harm is here with us, and we can do nothing but let people know that, there exists this. And it's good to know, so that you at least know that you have a choice, because you still do have a choice in theory. Okay,
Right.
because then in practice, if your behavior has been engineered to accept this as your norm, then you might not feel that you have a choice. But hopefully and gradually the behavior can change. But that's all we can do at this point.
Right. I think that there's so many paradoxes in all of this. I was just thinking, because even like us having this conversation now, and let's say with an intent to spread awareness, like any one bad actor who happened to read that study, that Facebook study from 2012, this massive, emotional contagion, how to affect, subliminally affect human emotions at scale, or watching this and learning about some of it, like, oh, I didn't know that. And if I have a bad idea and I want to scale it up, I can also use this. So
Yeah.
it's we are in an evolutionary double bind. We have to, in a way, we feel it feels meaningful and purposeful for us to do what we do, but then we cannot prevent the possibility of any of this information being weaponized, right, by anyone but actor who finds it. And yet we live in the age of information. So this is just the nature. This is our metaphysic, is a word. This is the ground reality. Information is the currency of today. It's not so much physical resources as it is the
Yeah.
informational resources, right? And another thing
Data
is,
is the new gold.
sorry,
As Shoshana Zuboff says,
right?
data is the new gold.
It is the
It's
new
the new
gold,
gold.
exactly. Exactly. And to be able to comprehend data and synthesize data will be the gold, the cognitive gold, as it were, right? To be able to actually make a meaningful and the least distorted synthesis of all the relevant information and avoid irrelevant information, which means also that there will be increasingly there will be incentives to disinform. So we will live through this age of, you know, getting worse and worse, exponentially bad in terms of misinformation, disinformation, and all of those technologies being weaponized in this way. So and our poor nervous systems will have to deal with that. So
Mhm.
and there will be, it's just around the corner where when humans will be the most privileged humans will be able to augment themselves and implant and whatnot, and become technically superior in this arms race for cognitive dominance, I guess. And that's where the whole philosophical thinking really kicks in, when you were talking about values before, and even a case that everyone's familiar with already, like autonomous vehicles. They are around a corner, and there's, obviously there have been problems, and there's this kind of like, how do we make it, like, who's responsible in case something goes wrong? Who is responsible, right?
Yeah.
Like, how can we make it mass produced? But then not even that, there's a classic thought experiment, the trolley problem,
Trolley
right? The
dilemma.
trolley problem.
Yeah, the
and
trolley
and look,
problem.
so and we, as English speaking culture, we have been, the household ethic has been utilitarianism. That J.S. Mill's legacy since 19th century has been utilitarianism, has been the English speaking world's baseline for ethics. But then we have Immanuel Kant, and is more like absolutist, kind of more closer to the old school Christian maybe ethic, and that is expressed in anti-terrorist law and many like critical legislation, I think, in between these two cultures. And there's like virtue ethics, there's different models of ethics.
Yeah,
So what does it even
exactly.
mean to be ethical, and how do
Exactly.
you get people to agree, and how,
Exactly. This is
without
exactly
a
what
top-down totalitarian kind of, like.
Exactly. This is exactly where I was coming from in the beginning
Mhm,
when I told you, you can look at it from all the different perspectives. So, if you, where do you start from? Where do you start from viewing this, even from an ethical and moral perspective? And this is just one conundrum. This is one problem. Self-driving vehicles, or
mhm,
the trolley dilemma. And this is exactly why we can both agree to say, okay, we want to prevent harm to people, but you might provide a solution to the trolley dilemma that I would think as abhorrent or not good, and it would harm people because I would view it from a different lens and from a different perspective, or provide different solutions or provide different ways of analyzing it. And it's exactly that. This is what's happening. This is what's happening at the moment with so many people, setting up task forces and summits and drive talks and meetings and seminars and stuff, which is all good because we all need to talk about them. But it's very difficult to reach one singular conclusion, which brings us back to your initial argument about,
yeah,
the
which is
synthetic.
great in a way, because that's where the most brilliant ideas come about. But if you are to bake those values into a technology that is then globally standardized, then
Exactly.
someone's idea has to win. And who has to say, right? That's the thing.
And with the rate that technology is accelerating, then people are saying we need to find a kind of solution as soon as possible, but it's not easy.
Because our competition will do it, right? So it's like we're in this multipolar trap where, we don't do it, then Chinese will do it before us, and they may not care about democratic process as much
And
as we do. So maybe, so the less democratic we are, the more authoritarian we become, then we their advantage is less asymmetrical, right? So we are also
couple of
politically in this kind of asymmetrical disadvantage against authoritarian regimes as a democratic society in this.
and
I'm
coupled to
sorry.
this, you've got the added complexity that people will buy it. You see, people will still buy it.
We'll buy it anyway, right?
People are being engineered to not live without this thing. They can't live without technology. They can't live without the comfort, the quality, the maybe life-changing impact of technology, which, yes, it has its positive points, absolutely. At this moment, anybody who's living completely off the grid and without any form of technology may probably, or we may probably see him as living a life that is not as comfortable as we live, no? Probably. That's the way we would see it. He might think differently, or she might think differently. But the issue is that the majority of people, in Western societies and in what we call maybe civilized societies, I don't know if we can still call these societies civilized. But, people are used to that. Without that, they're seen as people that are coming from difficult backgrounds.
1 second, just close the window because it's
Okay.
loud. Yes, so I think there's no question about. Obviously, it's tempting to be a Luddite sometimes, and like, I just want to live in a forest, like obviously that's not what we're made for. We are tool makers. We've always made tools, and we have to learn how to live with them. But yeah, with the consolidation of wealth and political power, it just becomes so problematic for us now, right? Because
That's
we are,
why.
for people who perhaps don't have this immense power or wealth, but happen to spend the days trying to understand a lot of these things, and a lot of people, it seems to me, a lot of people with a lot of political and monetary resources don't necessarily really grasp the complexity of the problem of many of those problems, and yet they are perfectly biased to that's how they became, that's why they got where they are. They are biased to be very hyper certain about certain things and get, getting where they are basically. And then that's why the blindness of the god, is that there's like this drive which manipulates humanity into these fantasies of utopian, technocratic dreams. But as a result, there's these unintended, or perhaps just out of neglect or out of hubris and greed and whatever, other vice you might add to it. It produces these tragedies really on the way to all this prosperity.
That is why I believe that at this point, there's no turning back. And I believe that at this point is the most important thing is education, and not education as in the teaching, the way we understand sometimes schooling and courses and stuff like that. No, it's about raising awareness in every possible way. It's about using the same tools, and this time making those tools in a way that they become helpful for the people to overcome this disinformation that you mentioned, or misinformation that you mentioned. Because maybe another evolution is coming of the human species. And this time the evolution will bring about this big chasm about these people who can manipulate the information and so are wealthy in that terms, and the poor people who cannot properly process the information, who can be misinformed, who can be disinformed, who can, be gullible to all kinds of fake information that is available, who are willing to share so much of their information and give so much without having nothing in return. So, there's going to be these kinds of people. So what we need to do is try to bridge that chasm. We need to overcome that gap and try to make society equal in their grasp of what's happening, in the way that things are happening as they are happening. And I think this is the only solution at this point. So we do something, anything, we can use all the tools that we can make use of. Information can be weaponized, but we can also use this for the benefit of the people. So this is, my 2 cents about what we can do at this point. So I think that the risks are very present. I think that harm is already, and we're going to see it manifested, the consequences of what's happening, what has been happening in this past decade. We're going to see them in the years to come now.
Yeah.
We're going to see more of the manifestations of what has happened in the past decades when it comes to information, right? So it's here, but what we can do is try to prevent more, harm. It's not easy. It is not easy, because remember that we're dealing with big tech giants, we're dealing with money, we're dealing with power, we're dealing with, Goliaths.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people who have voices, who are trying to create these ripples, these waves, to try and also maybe, use the contagion experiment in the favor of, propelling forward these ideas, these thoughts.
Really, and we know it's happening. We
Beyond
know
engineer.
there are growing islands of, of movements and initiatives and kind of communities where people are really fed up with. They're happy to give up all those, you know, utopian ideals, and um, and I think there's a lot of dissent in my own circle. I know people who used to work in the Silicon Valley and left, and now they're focused on kind of, yeah, what can I do with all this knowledge, with that? But I already walked away from money. I think the bottom line is walking away from money, really.
Yeah.
Where in the world where money has become like an icon, like an absolute goal, and yet money is just an idea, right? Really, people forget that it's just assigning currency to something that is subjectively
But
decided when it is.
it is still driving the world. It is
It
still
is. It
what
is.
it is. I mean, if you talk to people on the streets, money is what is important to their lives. We talk
Mm.
about happiness, but then again, people will tell you without money, there's no happiness. So, so money is still driving the way forward. I think that yes, and money will continue because money is universal. The thing is that are you happy that you're, making somebody a millionaire by exploiting what you know, or by exploiting you as a person, or by being a human experiment? Are you
Right.
happy with that?
Exactly. And I think it's
No, it's
just
okay. If you're happy,
if you're happy,
because
yeah.
you're there, you're fully cognizant of what's happening to you, that's fine. But I want to make you aware, you know? If you're happy with that, but really be aware of what's happening, and maybe also be aware of how many millions people are making with you exploiting whatever they've come up with.
Exactly. And I think there's this saying, it's easier to fool people than to help them, to make them realize they have been fooled. And I think that plays a great
Yeah.
deal of our difficulty now, because you can certainly engineer people's mindsets and sense-making framework into really being happy with something that's, well, substandard of what they are really capable of.
A couple of
And
decades ago, we used to think that there was this distinction between the generations, Generation Z and Generation X and baby boomers. We used to make quite, in the early 2000s, it was the cry of the day. I think that the lines have been completely blurred in these past, what, 5 to 10 years, maybe. We should no longer be talking about that. We should no longer be talking about the generations and how different generations' attitudes vary towards technology. I think that the technology has impregnated our lives so much that it is irrespective of age, it is irrespective of intellectual abilities, it is irrespective of educational levels, it is irrespective of societal status. It is something that touches everyone, and it is something that everyone can fall for as a trap, okay, irrespective of, the nature of their profession, how much money they have, how well, how academic they
how
are.
credentialized, yes.
For me, it is not making, now the technology is not making a distinction anymore.
And it
Okay,
will be less and less so, right? As the AIs really evolve,
exactly.
the
Now
deceptions will be more and more sophisticated.
the distinction will be about from those who know what's happening and those who don't. So that's why we need to inform those who don't about what is happening.
To the extent that we can. And it's obviously, to end on a positive note, I think we also do have, because of all of this doom and gloom, we deal with this doom and gloom, but at the same time, I always repeat, have access to this very same tools,
Yeah.
and just as scalable, and we know the tricks of the game. So we know how to, like, the algorithms trick us. If we learn the tricks, we can trick the algorithm back, right? And so on. So we do actually can use the devil's tools for, how do you say, it's for God's work, as proverbially people say, right? So we do have the access to the countermeasures. It's just that it kind of has to be non-utilitarian. I think the mindset, the intention must be in a way idealistic, because it is like a battle of a David and Goliath, and it's kind of exciting because yeah, it's cool. Like, before this time, it was kind of boring. I think this time is pretty exciting for all the rebels and all the people who are actually have an idealistic, trait, and get off on
Get your
really.
brains together.
Yeah, and it's
Creative
challenging, but
solutions.
that's how we evolve, don't we? We need to have challenge to actually face it and learn from each other. And there's more incentive as well, meeting up like this and picking each other's brains. And it's just so much, people are much more open to doing this now because of this. The room is filling up with water, and we're like, okay, we have
Let's
to kind of
survive.
collaborate. So it's
Let's
great. I
survive.
think it's a great catalyst despite all the risks and everything. But it's a great catalyst for us to come together and, like, inspire each other and come up with new projects and communities and so on, which we see like proliferating. So great. Thank you, Vanessa, and
Thank
we'll
you,
we'll
Adam.
speak again soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye.